Gates. Not the most exciting topic, but I found some ways to turn it around and make it a bit more interesting. Let's dive into it. Alright, so hey guys, welcome back to the channel, Chris here. In today's video I basically thought we'd take a look at gates. Recently I've come across a couple different methods and a couple different uses we could use them for, as opposed to your classic So I'm not going to waste any time, let's dive straight in. So what do I mean exactly by getting this a bit more creative? So let's take a look. Here I've just got my standard Ableton session open, and what I'm going to test this on is primarily synths, but we can try out a couple different methods that I've got in mind. So, you know, normally when I'm using a gate, I would use it on a vocal or on an electric guitar or something to just take out all the extra noise that I've got in the recording, and that usually helps clean up the recording quite a bit. And that's how most people probably approach using gates, but throughout time there's been these kind of creative uses that people have discovered on how you can get a bit more interesting sounds out of it, basically. So with that said, let's dive in. Over here on my keys and synths section in my Ableton template, I've got a couple of synths loaded up. I'm going to be using the Polymax for this, and actually not a new plugin that I've got, but I've had this plugin for a while. I've always just struggled rooting it, but it's Cthulhu by Xfer, and it's basically a chord generator. Very exciting to get some really nice chords from one note at a time, like so. Very inspiring. So with that in mind, this is the synth sound we're using. Nice little Polymax patch. And so what I'm going to show you is, the first thing I had in mind is this kind of trance gate sound. You've probably heard it. It sounds a bit like this. Now I'm using LFO tool to do this. You can see up on the screen I've got this. It's basically ducking the volume in a gated sequenced pattern. And there's a couple of ways you can do this. I'm using LFO tool, but you can use something like Shaper Box if you have that. Similar effect. What I like about Shaper Box, I mean as well LFO tool, but they all have their own unique uses, is I can copy this and I can assign it to, say, a filter instead. So it's doing the same thing, it's just opening and closing whatever you put into it, and in this case it's opening and closing the filter. If you don't have either of these and you want to go the really manual route, if I turn off the Shaper Box, go into my sequence over here, in utility, you can see I've created literally just automation, automating the volume, open and closed. If I go a little bit before, you can hear what sounds like open and then the gate coming in. So you can automate that, and then what's nice is you can actually just copy this whole thing and just shift it, you know. So I've got a couple of repetitions of it. Or if you want something slightly different, you can actually just nudge it over one, and obviously you'd have to hear this in context with a metronome to see what the difference is in the rhythm. So you've got that. You've got a couple of options for you there, but that is one method that I really enjoy using, is this kind of trance gate thing, and it's becoming more and more popular with the kind of re-rise of EDM and all of this drum and bass stuff and whatever. So it's a really cool sound, I really dig it. I want to show you another method of using a gate that I think is quite interesting, which is putting it on top of a reverb. Obviously you don't get any of the sequenced gate stuff, but you get some really fascinating effects on what the gate, how the gate responds to something with reverb on it. So again, if I'll just use the group as the example. So if I get a regular gate, there we go, slap that on there. So you can see this is the gate. Open, close. And you can actually use this in many different ways. You can sidechain it, and that's quite interesting. but at the end of the day, it's just turning on and turning off the sound. And obviously you've got your attack, your release settings, so you can change how this gate reacts. So if I slap just some regular reverb on the end of this, so you can hear even with the reverb, it's cutting that short, which is kind of an interesting effect because normally reverb will extend your sound, which in this case it's just like, nope. So where I find it gets really interesting, let's extend that reverb a bit, see what we're working with. Okay, now we'll get that gate and we're gonna put it just on the brink of cutting off and turning on. Make it quite fast. And you can hear what's going on, this kind of very interesting, stuttery kind of effect. Again, another example, I recently reviewed this plugin, which is all of these tools in one. So it's a gate and a reverb and a drive all in one. So I could turn off all of these effects and we'll just stick with this. Very fascinating plugin. I would recommend you check out Safari. Let's see. So if I put this on full wet, woo, super saucy. Okay, let's turn off everything and let's just work with the reverb. And I've got this blend on full, so you're just hearing the reverb right now. Okay. Add a bit of drive. And now this is where it gets interesting. So in this plugin, you've got obviously a gate, but you can assign it to be before the reverb, after the reverb, or in both positions. So in this case, before the reverb, it's just going to cut off the sound, but let the reverb tail remain. After the reverb, you start to get this. Woo. And I really love that. And then they also give you a drive to stick after everything. So let's turn this way down. And then you have the choice to stick a gate before and after, so a little bit of both. Really fascinating. So you see you've got these kind of interesting uses. I like doing this similar effect on drums. So let me quickly get up a drum break we can use. Okay, so here's our drum break. Very simple, very straightforward. Let's slap the Dirty Dog on there and let's give it a fiddle. Oof. And remember, we're just hearing the full wet sound, so if I start to blend in a bit of that dry signal, you'll hear the effect it adds. Let's try it on just the post. Super fascinating. Like, you can really achieve sounds that maybe aren't necessarily in your vocabulary or whatever. Like, it's a very different sound that you can use in some really fascinating ways. Now, one thing I had seen, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the idea of the sidechain sound. If you're not, it sounds a little something like this. It's just an amp envelope, you know, changing the volume in this rhythmic kind of pattern. You can see how it looks here. So awesome, you've got that there, really cool. But you can actually do the opposite of having a sidechain gate. So every time a sound hits, instead of ducking the original sound and then releasing on the offbeat, it basically activates when the sound hits and then ducks when there isn't any sound. So if I program a quick little drum beat, Nice. So I've got my programmed beat. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get that synth I was using. Let's get that Polymax. We can turn off the kickstart. And so now, if I grab that gate I had here, if I open up this, you can see I've got the sidechain option. And what's cool is I can pick one of those tracks. I've obviously separated the drum parts out. I could have played it all in one and still made this work, but for the sake of the example, I'm just going to show you on separated bits. And actually, if I pull the kit down here, just so you can see for the example how this works. If I sidechain this to the kick, for example, you can see it's closed. You can still hear it because it's a bit quiet, but if I pull this floor all the way to the bottom, you're not going to hear anything until and I can change how this gate is affected with the attack and release, and that will add its own kind of envelope to the sound and becomes really interesting. Or I can change it to be on the snare, for example, and you'll see the difference there. Like for me, that kick sound is really awesome. I really dug the effect that it provided. So let's just hear that one more time. Oh my god, bright, I didn't even realize. But there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let us know in the comment section below what you thought, and like and subscribe. The support really helps. And thank you so much to everyone who's already done so. I really appreciate it. Once again, I've been Chris Vella, and I'll see you in the next one.